Monsieur le Président.
Pardon?
Point of order, Chair. Yes, Mr. Chair. The Minister of the Environment and Climate Change of Canada undertook to come see us before the 18th of June. We learned that he will not be there on the 18th of June, so this may be our last meeting, so it's impossible for him to testify. It's unacceptable that the Minister of Environment refuses to appear as a witness to respond to questions from MPs. We are seeing this a lot in the House of Commons. We saw him answer questions during question period. That is very good. His duty is also to answer questions in the Environment Committee, where we could go in depth, expand on a number of issues and topics, and it is responsibility to be accountable.
Not there and cannot answer questions to the parliamentarian in this committee. We have seen him a lot of time in the House of Commons, which is great, by the way. He was the one who answered questions on the first round by the leaders, and he was there, he's in the House, he's in the building, but cannot attend to be here in the House of the committee. This is totally unacceptable, irresponsible, and especially he doesn't want to go in the deep question that we have when we are here sitting in this room. We have plenty of opportunities to talk to him. He has plenty of opportunity to come here, and he decides not to answer a question of the parliamentarian in this committee. This is shameful.
Point of order.
Um,
Along the same lines. I think it's just.
well, I want to say something. C'est vrai qu'il a été invité pour le.
It's true he was invited to come on the 18th. He wasn't invited to come today. It may be better to wait for the 18th of June. And if the minister doesn't appear for a good reason or for whatever reason, you can make that comment at that time. But he wasn't expected here today. So we are not here dealing with after the fact. It's true that the signal I received that there may be a problem with his timetable, but he may appear.
It's still, that was the indication he was not coming here. That was like 2 days ago. And I think it's imperative, if you can get on his schedule at all. He has questions to answer without a doubt. They're telling Canadians today that they're reducing emissions and are not even measuring the amount of emissions being reduced from the carbon tax.
I will take it up with the minister.
I certainly
But I
hope
think
you do.
before we condemn the minister for not showing up on the 18th, we should wait for the 18th.
I'm looking forward to the 18th and
Okay,
seeing him
good.
here.
Okay, mais nous avons par contre avec nous.
But with us today, we have CEOs of the 5 biggest Canadian banks. Can everyone hear me in English or in French? Do you all have access to interpretation? First of all, I want to thank you for being here with us to participate in this important and interesting study for the committee and for the future of our economy. During a time of transition towards a greener economy, every witness. Let me reassure Ms. Posey that sound tests have been done and everything is fine and good. Let me tell the witnesses on the screen, if you are not speaking, please mute yourselves to avoid any noises from your surroundings. Every witness will have 5 minutes for opening remarks, and we will be starting with Mr. Darrell White, CEO of BMO Financial Group. Mr. White, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
So we can.
Thank you. Chair and honorable members of the committee, my name is Darrell White, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of BMO Financial Group. I'm pleased to join my competitors today to discuss the work of the financial sector relevant to this committee's study. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional lands of the Indigenous people that I'm joining from today and that we have the privilege of doing business on. We acknowledge that BMO's work spans across many Indigenous territories. With that, I will continue my remarks. Le rôle de BMO.
BMO's role as a financial institution that is committed to facilitating Canada's growth while having a positive social impact is reflected in our raison d'etre, having the guts to make a difference in life as well as in business. This raison d'etre guides our strategy, fuels our ambitions, and reinforces our commitment towards progress towards a thriving economy, a sustainable future, and an inclusive society. While my remarks focus mainly on BMO, it's important to note that the entire banking sector makes a significant contribution to net zero emissions. This includes working with international groups such as the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and within the country with our regulators such as the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions.
And relevant to today's discussion, we are leveraging our experts to support all of the communities we serve across Canada and their diverse economies. Some specific examples of how we work collaboratively with clients, both within and outside the natural resources sector, include BMO's Energy Transition Group, formed in 2021. Our team delivers innovative investment banking solutions with our clients as they look to decarbonize their businesses and pursue energy transition opportunities. This work is complemented by the BMO Climate Institute, which helps our clients bridge the complexities of climate science and policy with economics and business strategy. BMO Radical, in 2022, BMO acquired Radical Group, a sustainability advisory services firm with an established reputation as a leading developer of carbon offsets and for helping organizations measure and reduce emissions. Sustainable financing activities integrated across our businesses. Since 2019, we have mobilized $330 billion in capital for clients pursuing sustainable outcomes, surpassing our goal of $300 billion by 2025. When it comes to managing our own value chain emissions, BMO has been carbon neutral in our operational emissions since 2010 and continues to aim for carbon neutrality and 100% renewable energy purchases. We're also setting net zero aligned operational emissions targets, including for our commercial real estate. We've developed a robust sustainable procurement program addressing our upstream value chain. In terms of downstream value chain emissions, BMO has set targets for financed emissions for certain carbon-intensive aspects of our lending portfolio. In this work, BMO is focused on serving a constructive role to help our clients decarbonize and make a real-world emission reduction. We describe BMO's client ambition as being our client's lead partner in the transition to a net zero world. This does not mean divesting from the energy sector. Instead, we're working with clients on the leading edge of new technologies and supporting the net zero transition of our traditional energy clients, working hard to change their emissions profile. The transition to a net zero world is not an either-or situation, but requires all of the above response. Banks have a critical role in supporting our clients, providing non-carbon energy sources such as nuclear, hydro, wind, solar, and others. Over the past several years, we've transitioned the way we communicate about our policies from a collection of sector-specific statements to emphasizing what we've always done, conducting comprehensive, risk-based approaches to credit judgment, underscoring our commitment to sound and prudent business practices while complying with the laws and regulations in the markets we serve. The challenges to achieving a net zero future are significant, and the investment needed will be substantial. Attracting the substantial capital needed for the net zero transition requires strong public-private sector collaboration as well as regulatory predictability. I hope the committee will consider this as it reflects on its recommendations. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Monsieur White,
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Now we'll give the floor to Mr. Victor Dudig, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Before I begin my remarks, I'd like to thank my counterpart for the land acknowledgement to begin the meeting today, which we also acknowledge. Thank you and good afternoon to everyone. Mr. Chair, our bank, CIBC, traces its roots back to 1867. Since Confederation, we've been an integral part of helping Canadians achieve their ambitions. In our early days as the Canadian Bank of Commerce, we helped capital flow to Canadian business owners who had aspirations to build our nation, and over the years, we've played a key role in enabling growth and prosperity for families and for businesses across our country. Today, we have more than 1,000 banking centers in Canada. Our team of over 48,000 strong operates with a single purpose, and that's to help make your ambitions a reality. That's true for our clients. It's also true for the millions of Canadians who hold an investment in our bank, either directly by holding shares or indirectly through mutual funds and pension plans. In addition, we're making significant investments to support communities across our country. In 2022, we announced the goal to contribute $800 million over the next decade to community investment initiatives. Over our long history, we have consistently addressed key issues facing our stakeholders, and climate change is no exception. Climate change is a critical global issue of our time. It's one that requires significant coordinated effort to drive change and achieve a more sustainable future for all. Our bank recognizes that we have a role to play in enabling solutions. We also recognize the natural resources, including oil and gas, play a critical role in Canada's economic foundation, and that Canada has a key role to play as a responsible provider of energy to the world, today and through the transition to a lower carbon future. We work alongside our clients in these industries to help them achieve their sustainability goals. We provide capital and financial advice to help make innovative energy solutions possible, and we're a leading provider of financing to the renewable energy sector. Our commitment to a more sustainable future includes our stated ambition to achieve net zero GHG emissions associated with our operational and financing activities by 2050. This ambition is integrated into our business activities. We also actively engage with our stakeholders to understand their perspectives, just as we're doing today, and to ensure that we're listening, learning, and taking into account a wide range of views. We disclose our progress publicly, as disclosed in our recent climate report. We're making progress against many of the goals we've put in place, including interim targets related to emissions intensity in specific carbon-intensive sectors and mobilizing sustainable finance towards our $300 billion goal by 2030 in support of environmental and social outcomes. This disclosure also enables productive dialogue with our stakeholders on climate-related issues. And we've built accountability into the process. Our ESG index, which includes climate-related goals, forms 10% of our business performance factor at our bank, which impacts compensation across our CIBC team. It's important to acknowledge that Indigenous communities are also central in resource development, and the road to net zero involves Indigenous lands. CIBC is dedicated to providing tailored and accessible financial services to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis clients in Canada. We take an active role in partnering with our Indigenous clients at the national and the local levels. We're proud that we recently received the Indigenous Reconciliation Award as part of the 2024 Employment Equity Achievement Awards organized by the Minister of Labour and Seniors. Within our capital markets business, renewables and energy transition growth is one of our top strategic initiatives, and our team invests significant time and resources in helping companies in this space to grow and achieve scale. Across our bank, we recognize climate change is a defining issue of our time. And as we've done at our bank since 1867, we're actively supporting the outcomes we all want for the future. We have a clear ambition, comprehensive disclosures, and we are making progress in helping clients transition their business to a low carbon future. And we acknowledge that there's more work to be done. I believe banks play a vital role as an enabler in creating a more sustainable and inclusive future, and we're committed to playing our part at CIBC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dodig. We'll go now to Mr. David McKay, President and CEO of the Royal Bank of Canada. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. Before I begin, I want to respectfully acknowledge and give thanks to the original peoples of the lands upon which each of us now live and work. And thank you for the opportunity to speak about how RBC is helping to accelerate the transition to a greener economy. As this committee knows, we're in a decisive decade for Canada's economy and the collective work required by us all on the climate transition. The coming years must see banks, businesses, and investors working alongside government to drive a fundamental reimagining of nearly every sector of the global economy. This means a climate-smart 21st century approach to how we generate energy, grow food, and construct buildings and infrastructure. Toutefois, la hausse des températures.
However, rising temperatures and the resulting storms and wildfires are a reminder of how essential it is for countries, businesses to work together to make the carbon neutral economy a reality, driven as we are by a strong sense of urgency. At RBC, we recognize the imperative of collective action on climate change, and we are committed to our role as a bank that will support our customers and communities in their efforts to decarbonize. That is how we believe we can have the most significant impact. Over the past few years, we have been laying the foundations to help our customers progress along the road towards net zero. We have achieved this by working more actively than ever before on ways to help our customers in the high emission sectors of the economy to adopt measures to reduce the level of emissions associated with their activities.
We're the first major Canadian bank to disclose a formal approach for engaging with our capital markets clients in the energy sector, including a framework that will guide how we assess their transition plans. This will help us deepen the support and advance and advice that we bring to those for producing the energy our world relies on, while we continue to work on bringing more renewable sources of energy online. Importantly, this new client engagement framework will also inform the decisions we make to disengage from clients who don't have credible plans to reduce their emissions. I'm pleased to share that almost 80% of RBC Capital Markets lending exposure in the energy sector is to clients who have transition plans. While many of these plans are still in the early stages, we're encouraged by the progress we're seeing as clients move forward on this complex, multi-decade journey to net zero. As a recent RBC Climate Action Institute report projects, Canada needs about $60 billion of annual private and public investment to reach its net zero goals by 2050. This is double what we currently spend, and it means we all need to do more. All banks, every level of government, businesses, both large and small, and all Canadians across the country. To help play a role in generating and attracting more capital to finance the shift to a new economy, we're accelerating our strategy to finance the energy sources needed to build a net zero economy. We're doing this by stepping up our focus on low carbon energy development opportunities, including new goals to triple our renewables lending by 2030 across RBC Capital Markets and commercial banking, allocating $1 billion of RBC capital by 2030 to support the development and scaling of innovative climate solutions, and a new decarbonization finance category that will help us accelerate the deployment of capital to emissions reduction efforts in high-emitting, hard-to-abate sectors. We're matching these actions with an even sharper focus on accountability and transparency, disclosing how we're tracking against our goals and more clearly and actively outlining the steps we are taking to support our clients. For example, we're now reporting our absolute financed emissions on an authorized basis for the oil and gas sector, and will continue to do so every year to show our progress. We also plan to disclose a clean energy supply ratio in RBC's 2024 climate report. Over the past year, I've spent a lot of time with our leaders and teams across the bank to find ways to better support our clients as they take action to reduce emissions. We've also engaged with many external experts and organizations, including government and Indigenous leaders, because getting to net zero will require unprecedented collaboration across all areas of the economy and all segments of society. While we know there's still much work to be done, RBC is up for the challenge and ready to continue helping our clients and communities build a greener economy. Thank you.
McKay, maintenant on se tourne.
Now we're giving the floor to Mr. Scott Thompson, CEO of Scotiabank. Mr. Thompson, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I am pleased to have this opportunity to provide comments during today's meeting. I'm joining this meeting today from our Scotiabank office in Toronto, which is home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. I acknowledge the treaty holders, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and recognize that Toronto is the dish with one spoon territory. What this acknowledgement means to me is that I'm grateful to the Indigenous stewards of these lands who have made it possible for me to participate in these important discussions today. It also serves as a reminder of my commitment to continue to remove barriers that have, in the past, made it difficult for Indigenous peoples to access financial services and have meaningful careers in the financial industry. I make these commitments as an individual and as a president and CEO of Scotiabank. I have the honor of leading this bank with an almost 200-year history supporting Canadians with their financial needs. Employing 40,000 people and serving more than 11 million clients coast to coast to coast, we take our role as an important pillar of the Canadian economy seriously. We're also a leading bank across North America, including being a top 10 foreign bank in the United States and the 5th largest bank in Mexico, with a market-leading presence in jurisdictions across the Caribbean and Latin America. In all the markets we operate in, climate change represents both an economic and business opportunity and complex risk for our clients and to our economy and physical environment. For Scotiabank's part, we're focused on working with our clients, including large corporate clients in high-emitting, hard-to-abate sectors, as well as smaller companies in the clean energy and technology sectors, to support them in the energy transition. Earlier this year, we released a standalone climate report to provide information about the ways in which Scotiabank is addressing climate action. Our climate goals are organized around 3 pillars where we, as a bank, can make the most significant impact. First, we are financing climate solutions with $350 billion in climate-related finance by 2030 and supporting our clients through advisory services and products as they invest in less carbon-intensive business models, finance emission-reducing technologies, and develop sustainable supply chains. Second, we are advancing sectoral targets by enhancing our understanding of our clients' transition planning activities, especially in industries where we have set 2030 interim targets, including oil and gas. We've also enhanced our financed emissions reportings and support for innovative research aimed at moving the needle on climate change. And finally, we are reducing our own emissions. In 2023, we committed to reduce the bank's own greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. This year, we reached our goal to have 100% of our electricity from emission-free sources in Canada. At the end of this year, we'll be publishing a more fulsome climate transition plan that will outline our strategy and then implementation plans to embed climate into relevant discussions across the enterprise. However, even with these actions, no bank can deliver this transition on their own. The transition to a low-carbon economy is a complex process that will take time and needs to occur in an orderly and responsible way, with close partnership between the private sector, government, and institutions to tackle the multi-pronged challenge of decarbonization, energy security, access, and affordability. As I have this opportunity before you with representatives from all our major political parties, my message is this. Canada is blessed with an abundance of natural resources, a highly educated population, strong governance, and a reliable financial system, all of which are required to accelerate economic growth and overcome many environmental challenges before us. Our production and environmental standards are amongst the highest in the world, regulated by institutions that ensure industry practices are monitored, measured, verified, and authenticated. Our extensive geography and geology allow for a growing mix of energy products at a time when the need for new and sustainable infrastructure across the continent, especially electricity generation, is undeniable. By clearing the obstacles that inhibit investment in technology and infrastructure, we have an opportunity to link Canada's climate strategy with our industrial strategy to reduce emissions and become recognized as a low-carbon, high-value add, and high IP leader in global sustainable infrastructure. I recognize the path forward will not be easy, but Canada's potential to reduce emissions while having a thriving economy is there. And Scotiabank is here to support those efforts. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We'll go now to Bharat Masrani, President and the Chief Executive Officer of TD Bank Group. Go ahead, Mr. Masrani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about the important study this committee is undertaking. And thank you to my colleagues for providing the land acknowledgement, which we as well acknowledge. Today, we find ourselves in the midst of a global economic transition to net zero that is unfolding against a backdrop of socioeconomic and geopolitical challenges. This transition requires focus, investment, innovation, and new technologies in all sectors of the economy. Progress will take engagement and partnership between the private and public sectors, and all of this is happening as people and societies, including financial institutions, face increasing climate risks. This afternoon, I'd like to make 3 key points related to this global context. The economic imperative, the critical importance of a balanced approach, and the need for engagement among all stakeholders. First, the economic imperative. We believe TD has an important role to play in supporting our clients in the transition to a low-carbon economy, and that focus on sustainability drives long-term value for our shareholders, the Canadian economy, and the many communities we serve. For a sense of the type of economic opportunity before us, TD Economics analysis shows that connecting new renewable power generation assets to the grid could require upwards of $25 to $50 billion in transmission investments alone by 2035 in the context of Canadian emissions reduction pathways. TD has a long history of environmental engagement that we are building on. More than 30 years ago, we launched the TD Friends of the Environment Foundation, helping to support grassroots projects in communities across Canada. We've been focused on decarbonizing our own operations. We were the first major bank in Canada to set a 2050 net zero goal, and in 2020 launched our Climate Action Plan. TD has also announced financing targets. In 2017, we introduced an initial low-carbon economy target for lending, financing, asset management, and internal corporate programs, and met it ahead of schedule. We then set our $500 billion sustainable and decarbonization finance target in 2023, and in the first year under the new target, delivered nearly $70 billion in business activities toward our goal. As we navigate this transition landscape, our focus is on resilience for the bank and our clients strategically, financially, and operationally. That brings me to my second point. We believe it is critically important to take a balanced approach through this transition to net zero. TD supports and engages with clients across all sectors as they meet the world's needs today while investing in opportunities to meet the demands of tomorrow, all within the larger context of meeting our long-term climate objectives. As part of our efforts to support our clients, we've released specific targets related to the energy, power generation, automotive, and aviation sectors. Led by our TD Securities ESG Solutions Group, we focus on understanding our clients' decarbonization initiatives and future plans and support them through advisory and financing solutions. That brings me to my third point, engagement with a range of stakeholders and partners. Our transition plan continues to evolve through work with clients and experts, engagement in industry forums, and consideration of new guidance. We think engagement with a broad set of stakeholders is critically important for us, Canada, and the world to meet our collective objectives and obligations. And on the role of policymakers specifically, government policy shapes how our clients navigate the net zero transition. I look forward to our discussion today because we are on this journey together. In the complex economic and geopolitical environment in which we find ourselves, we understand that TD has an important role to play and can make a positive contribution through our own efforts and by supporting engagement among stakeholders and partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Masrani. We'll go now to our first round of questions, the 6-minute round, and we start with Mr. Deltel.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are delighted to receive this very impressive panel of quality decision makers from the Canadian banking world. Gentlemen, you are welcome to your House of Commons in Ottawa. You know that we are all facing climate change. We have to take the right action. We need to act efficiently. We need to be practical for things to work and for us to reduce gas emissions. In the financial world, you are at the core of decisions and possibilities, opportunities to grow by reducing pollution and opportunities to reduce pollution in the approaches that each business can adopt. Therefore, my first question goes to Mr. White. Mr. White, when an entrepreneur knocks on your door at the bank to invest $10 million to increase their production because the business is faring well, but maybe the business doesn't have the right environmental balance sheet, will you refuse to give them a loan? Such a business that is growing, what action will you take towards such a business?
Je remercie.
I thank the MP for the question. I'll try to be, for my answer to be exact, I'll answer in English.
Your question. First thing I would say, Mr. Deltel, is we do not take a view that we wouldn't support any particular sector. And so in the example that you give, if a client came in, we would assess the risks of their proposal, all of the risks of their proposal, whether they be environmental, credit, market risk, legal risk, and we would assess their proposal as we would any other, regardless of whether it was a carbon-related proposal or not.
So if there is a carbon related, and then you realize that it's not attaining any goal to reduce the emission. So if we shut down this project, what could happen? The entrepreneur can go offshore, can go in another bank, can go in other country banks to get this money, or is that impossible for him or for her to develop his company?
The entrepreneur in that particular instance would have an opportunity to go to multiple channels to source the capital.
And so he can go offshore. So even if we in Canada refuse that, he can have access to money offshore. So at the end of the day, the pollution will go on.
It's difficult to opine on a hypothetical, but I agree with you. Practically speaking, that could be the case.
That's fine. Okay, my other question will go now to Mr. McKay from the Banque Royale du Canada. Mr. McKay, there is a report, an annual report at each and every year about the banking system and the investment in hydrocarbures. Alors, c'est le palmarès mondial du financement d'hydrocarbures.
They have the price for hydrocarbons. The Royal Bank, your institution, is rated 7th for having invested a lot in hydrocarbons. Are you proud of this, or do you think this is disturbing?
Well, thank you for your question. I think if you look at the Canadian economy, RBC is one of the largest banks in the world, top 10 bank in the world. You look at the energy intensive nature of the Canadian economy, it's going to take us a while to transition in a very complex journey. And therefore, our focus is obviously on transition financing and on emissions. And that's why you've seen us make commitments of absolute reduction and commitments on financing. So I think the most important part of this is the $15 billion that we tripled our investment in renewable energy, the $1 billion of equity commitment, all part of a very important transition. So I think if you look at the context of RBC in the world, look at the context of RBC as the largest bank in the country, you look at the context of where we've come from as a country, that energy has been very important to the economy, will continue to be very important to the economy as we make this complex transition. I think we're focused on the right things.
Je vais donner l'exemple de ma province.
Let me give you the example of my province, which uses oil. According to studies, the annual report that was recently submitted, we've learned that more than 18 million liters of oil are used in Quebec, a 7% increase. And on this part of the house, for as long as we need fossil energy, we will be fighting, be it Canadian energy or foreign energy.
My question is, if you refuse support for oil and gas company because maybe their bilan is not so good on the green aspect, so what this business can do offshore. So at the end of the day, they will have access to funding. So do you think that we should have here in Canada more straight line to help the businesses in hydrocarbures, or we can put emphasis to reduce the emission when we have a deal with this kind of companies?
You have 30 seconds.
Well, I really believe it's important that every company have a plan. And as I said in my opening comments, 80% of our energy companies have a plan going forward. It's very important that we're transparent in tracking those plans and the progress of those plans. It's a complex journey, and we have to get moving. And so I would say that financing has to be available to help make the transition. Financing has to be available to maintain economic strength as well. One of the greatest risks
we're going to have to go to Madame Chatel. We're over time. I'm sorry. Madame Chatel.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, witnesses. I'll be switching from French to English.
From my constituent, many of them are angry, they're worried, and they find it hard to reconcile your net zero commitment with the constant increase in investment in fossil fuels sector. And the Transition Pathway Initiative assessed that Canadian banks score very poorly for their transition to net zero compared to their peers. So my question, Mr. Dodig, how are you measuring real progress for your organization that include interim target, not just the objective of 2050, but real progress in the interim?
Madame Chatel, thank you for your question, and thank you for your service to our country. I recognize that many Canadians are anxious about what lies ahead in the transition. How will this all play out? How will it benefit the environment? How will it benefit their own economic security? And I want to assure you that at CIBC, our team works with our clients to ensure that our path to net zero is aligned with their path to net zero. We've signed the Net Zero Banking Alliance, pledging to be net zero by 2050. And for us to achieve that, we need to achieve that as a bank on our own, but we also need to achieve it with our clients. So we work with them, regardless of their size. And we start with the oil and gas sector, the energy sector, the automotive sector, and we continue to move on to understand what are their targets to 2050, what are their interim targets, are they highly aligned with our own, and if they don't have a plan, we work with them to achieve that plan. And I'm very encouraged by the interim targets that we're achieving so far. There's more work to do. We've set those targets for 2030. I would say that in most instances, we're ahead of plan with our clients, and we remain committed to that 2050 net zero goal.
Thank you very much. Mr. White, can you please articulate the key benefit for your organization to have a science-aligned green and transition taxonomy and disclosure as proposed by the Sustainable Financial Action Council, which I believe you were part of?
Oui, merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
Consider the role of the banks in the overall ecosystem. We talk about, in my opening remarks, I talked about partnering with our clients to be their partner in the net zero transition. That means our clients drive the decisions that work for their businesses, and we work to structure financial solutions around them. The reason that's relevant to the taxonomy is because having a common language, i.e. a taxonomy, is generally useful as we look to couple the work we do with our clients with sourcing international capital. It's been referenced in this meeting how much capital is going to be needed for the transition itself, and attracting in international capital is made easier by a common taxonomy. It's not to say without it that we don't invest in the transition. We are, as we've demonstrated in our comments today, but to me, the value of the taxonomy is in the common language that we would all have internationally.
Thank you. And also, as for investors, we want to invest in clean and net zero a portfolio. We want to have that. We want our pension to have that. We want to be helping the transition of Canada. But it's hard when you don't have disclosure of scope 1, 2, 3. Well, 1 is something, but scope 2 and 3 emission. Do you support the work of the government to provide a good system of taxonomy? As you said, it's a common language, right? We will have to speak the same language, not only in Canada, but with our trading partner as well, with other capital investors, and a disclosure, because we need to know that we have the investment in the net zero.
So thank you for the question. I do think that it is useful because it would create a common language, as I said earlier, in terms of how we effectively label sustainable finance, and conversely, finance does take place without the taxonomy. In the end, the more common disclosure we can all have, the better, simply put.
Merci.
Thank you. For Mr. McKay, we know that taxonomy and disclosure rules have not yet been implemented in Canada. They are on the way. How important is it for your organization to have clear rules and common rules that are applied by all the banks?
Thank you very much for that question. I think it is very important that we have a strong taxonomy for the country, not only for domestic investment in our transition, to your point, but also for international investment. When you're trying to attract $2 trillion of investment by 2030 to make this journey, when you have to double from 30 billion to 60 billion, when you have to transition your energy grid and those sources, it's very important that we as a country agree on this journey, because one of the risks to not being successful is not agreeing on how we want to make this journey as a country, as individuals, as companies, as governments, as municipalities. We have to agree on the journey. And I think the taxonomy, to your point, brings us together on that point. And then we have to be clear on where the rules are. Otherwise, investors do not like uncertainty and
Thank you.
prefer certainty and action.
Thank you. Madame Posé, à vous la parole.
Oui, merci.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I would have preferred you to be here in person rather than virtually, but right away, I would like to say that your institutions are important and you are not heading those institutions because you lack competence. It's thanks to your competence and talent. That being said, we are at a crossroads. You have a moral and fiduciary responsibility to take concrete action. In all your opening remarks, you made statements towards a future that it's moving towards net zero. My question goes to Mr. Masrani, but everyone could answer. But I picked you, Mr. Masrani. In May 2024, the National Observer of Canada published a survey on the interactions between fossil fuels and other industries. A single bank has about 6 billion in fossil fuel industries. For BMO, a single administrator has about 2 billion. So my question is, how can you make sure that the influence of some of these single members is not used for personal purposes to fill their pockets as shareholders? I'm talking about decisions that could be prejudiced, investment and loan decisions that have to do with the climate that may be influenced because of their shares.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for her question. We we've released a climate action plan in 2020 that lays out a roadmap as to how TD, gets to the net zero world. In the meantime, we also have provided interim targets, and we also annually provide a reporting suite with clear criteria as to how we are measuring our progress. In my opening remarks, I talked about a sustainability and decarbonization target of $500 billion. In the first year alone, we delivered.
I'm sorry, Mr. Masrani. I listened to your opening remarks, but I'm talking about your boards of administration. Is it possible that there be conflicts of interest? Do you have a way of making sure that some members of the board do not have undue influence? That's what I would like to know. Do you have any possibility of conflicts of interest?
No, if at board meetings and board members have to declare all their conflicts, when they attend board meetings, if there is any conflict of any kind, they recuse themselves from any decision. So that's how it operates in every major corporation in Canada, and we follow those rules very diligently.
D'accord. Alors, je vous...
Very well. Thank you for your answer. Now, I have a question for Mr. McKay. In your institution, there's clear absence of administrators with climate experience that is necessary to assess behaviors, to correctly assess the risks of climate change at RBC. How is the Board of Administration taking climate decisions if it has no expertise in the domain, and if rather it has direct financial influence in investing in the petroleum sector?
Thank you for your question. We have a very strong and diverse board of directors with many, many skills. The board of directors has access to our full management team, which is highly skilled in climate change, from engineers to experts we rely on in our Climate Institute and our risk management teams and our finance teams. And we make the board open to meeting with external experts. We have done quite consistently, advising the board and explaining to the board the complexity of their journey, how to take their journey, how to think about climate change. So I do believe the board is strong, has access to internal management.
Je vous interromps aussi. Donc, je comprends.
I take it that you tried to base your decisions on science from experts who are there. My third question goes to Mr. Thompson from Scotiabank. All banks represented here are members of the Net Zero Banking Alliance with more than 140 financial institutions in the world. So with this commitment, it's clear that there should be an internal policy guided by science to head towards net zero. But you are also members of the Canadian Association of Banks and the Canada Chamber of Commerce, which publicly have opposed the climate change decisions or economy in Canada. So who are you loyal to? To the Alliance or to the Chamber of Commerce? Because you can't be loyal to both parties.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Chairman. We are a signatory to the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and we do voluntarily commit to reducing our financed emissions from our lending investment portfolios over time to align with pathways to net zero by 2050. What I would say is I'm very proud of the work that has been done to date to do that. As I said in my opening comments, we have a $350 billion target, of which we've already achieved 182. And importantly, on the path
Monsieur Thompson,
Mr. Thompson, let me stop you there. Yes, you've done some things, but you are also a member of two associations that are against climate policies. So is it not difficult to take a decision since you are members of those two associations?
What we have done is we've set these sectoral targets, which have highlighted interim progress to 2030 in oil and gas, power and utilities, and transport. And that allows us to get to the path to 2050 and the commitments to net zero.
Thank you.
So I'm very pleased with where we're heading.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My questions through you, sir, will be to the CEO of RBC, Mr. McKay. Mr. McKay, I'm going to put a series of questions to you. It might feel like it's in a bit of a rapid-fire way. If I do reclaim my time, for example, interrupt you to reclaim my time, it's not personal. I just want to make sure that I have a chance to ask all the questions. So, Mr. McKay, as Canada's top fossil fuel bank, RBC disclosed a bombshell data point a few months ago that RBC's emissions from financing oil and gas companies are equal to the emissions from all cars, light trucks in Canada every year. This is a shocking amount of pollution that a single company, RBC, finances and is responsible for every year. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. McKay, what are you doing to cut this in half over the next 6 years, as scientists say must happen to avoid more fires and floods?
Thank you for that question. Mr. Chair, my last name is pronounced Mackay, not McKay. It's just for...
You know what? I asked the clerk. I suspected that.
Mr. Chair, I want my time.
Yeah,
I don't want any interruptions.
You're going to get your time. So
okay.
Don't worry. Okay, go ahead,
Mr. Mackay, please answer the question.
So as we talk about, I mean, I can't reconcile any of the numbers that you mentioned, but as you think about the journey that we're on in the complex journey, it's important that we made a $15 billion commitment to investing in renewables. That's
sir, you said that in your opening remarks. Mr. Mackay, RBC is under investigation right now by the Competition Bureau of Canada for misleading customers by touting its climate record, as you've done in your opening remarks, while continuing to be one of the largest financiers of fossil fuels in the world. So how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile that to the customers who you sell this greenwashed messaging to, who feel misled?
There was one complaint from an individual to the Competition Bureau. The Competition Bureau did a full review, and we've not heard anything from that whatsoever.
On the questions of ethics, Mr. Mackay, Canadian banks are still financing an expansion of fossil fuels, which goes against our need for clean energy transition. Last year, your company listed 4th. Scotiabank was 6th in the top 10 banks around the world financing fossil fuel expansion, new oil and gas pipelines, and power plants that lock in new emissions for decades to come. When will you stop greenwashing and doublespeak with climate plans when really you're the companies pouring fuel on the fire?
I respectfully disagree with your points. We are a big part of the solution. You've seen the commitments we've made to transition financing. You've seen the transparency that we have within the emissions that we have from our core sectors, whether it's automotive, transportation, energy, manufacturing. We're very clear on the emissions that are coming from our lending portfolio. We've made commitments to reduce those by 2030 and to net zero. We've made commitments to reduce for clients.
Okay, Mr. Mackay. In
And from that
2021,
perspective, I think we've
I'm satisfied with your response. In 2021, the Queens Finance Association hosts an event called Road to CEO, featuring you, sir. At the start of the appearance, in relationship to RBC's financing of fossil fuels, you said, and I quote, "I have not had one prime minister, one cabinet member, not one single elected official has called me and said, 'Dave, why are you doing this?' You'd think that if we were doing something wrong, if we were financing something we shouldn't be, someone in the Liberal government would have called and said, 'Dave, why are you doing this?' You said, and I quote, 'In fact, they call me and say, you have to finance the transition.' So who in this Liberal government has called you and asked you to finance oil and gas sector?"
The energy sector is a big part of the Canadian economy. And as I said in my remarks, this is a transition. This is a complex transition. We are not getting off fossil-based fuels immediately. Just stop is just not an option for us. We have to commit to finding greener sources of energy. We have to accelerate that transition. There is an anxiety in the country about making this transition. And therefore, Canada has to move and keep moving forward. So
Mr. McKay, I'm going to ask you directly, sir, as an elected official, I'm going to ask you directly, why are you financing the expansion of the oil and gas sector when we know that we have climate targets that are rapidly approaching beyond a place from which there's no return, sir?
We're financing the transition. Energy is still a big part of the Canadian economy, and therefore we have to continue to support the economy as we make the transition. You have to do both. You can't just do one.
So if we're talking about a balanced approach, sir,
we're focused on reducing.
Can you please provide me with the amount at which you finance oil and gas versus which you finance the transition? Let's just compare those two numbers.
I don't have that number in front of me. I can tell you we made a $15 billion commitment to the transition. We made a $500
but you don't know how much you have in oil and
commitment
gas?
to sustainable funds. I've financed $400 billion of that $500 billion commitment to sustainable finance, sustainable transition. So
I'm sorry,
I don't have the number
Mr.
on
Chair,
top of my head because
the double speak sometimes obfuscates what I'm trying to ask, so I'm going to ask it very directly. Is it your testimony here today that you have donated, or you have donated, kind of, that you have put $400 billion in oil and gas and $15 billion in the transition? Is that the scale of magnitude that we're talking about here?
No, $400 billion I referred to was sustainable financing across a number of initiatives. So I was trying to explain before you cut me off that we finance a number of transition initiatives from equity.
But you don't know your total
small business
holdings in oil
entrepreneurs.
and gas. You don't have that as a CEO. You don't know that.
I can get you for that. No, I don't have it on top of my head because it breaks down by different sector, different countries, different regions, different capabilities. So we can get that for you. It's in our disclosure, so you could look it up as well.
Thank you.
Mr. McKay, would you be able to send that to the committee in writing? Those numbers that you mentioned that you have. Thank you.
To be clear, the request was for our financing from.
Well, I'll ask Mr. Green. Could you be clear on the request?
Well, I want it comparable. He's touting the $15 billion that he says.
No, I just want to know what is it you're looking from him.
The total investments in oil and gas sector. It's a
Okay,
very
total
straightforward
investments
question.
in oil and gas. If you could get that to us, that would be
Very
great.
straightforward.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
To our second round, and we start with Mr. Mazier for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start my questions, I want to give verbal notice of a motion. Given that the Liberal government...
Excuse me just a second. I'm going to break for 2 seconds. I want to clarify something. Away from your. Whereas if you were moving the motion, that would be it after you were done moving the motion.
Okay, thank you. I'm just giving notice.
Yeah, I just noticed. Okay, go ahead.
Given that the Liberal government released its internal economic data on the carbon tax, revealing it cost Canadians $30.5 billion and over $1,800 for every household in Canada, this is in addition to the increased cost of the carbon tax puts on gas, groceries, and home heating, and the Liberal government tried to cover up this information from Canadians when the parliamentary budget officer revealed that the Liberal government has had this data. They placed him under a gag order and attempted to ruin his reputation. The committee report to the House that the Environment Minister must resign immediately.
You have any questions for our witnesses? We can go ahead now. Yep.
Thank you. And thank you for the witnesses for attending virtually here today. We talked a lot about investment here. I think I don't know if I got over $100 billion or how much you guys figured how much we needed here for transition financing. So, Mr. McKay, will the government's capital gains hike drive investment into Canada or out of Canada?
Thank you for your question. As you talk about investing in any country, investors look for certainty. They look for opportunity. And therefore, as you think about attracting capital, tax policy is very, very important. There's a number of ways of looking at tax policy at the end of the day, but tax policy is a big part of how we need to think about being competitive in the world. And you have to balance multiple facets, not just one facet.
Capital definitely is needed to, if we want to transition properly, we need a lot of capital. So the tax hike on capital gains would you say be detrimental? Would it drive investment into Canada or drive investment away from Canada? I guess a capital tax gain increase.
To your point, we need $2 trillion of capital. I won't speculate what it will do or won't do at this time. But a stable, predictable tax regime is very, very important.
How about the other executives? Do you think the capital gains hike will impact investment into Canada or drive it out? Start with TD.
I mean, it's hard to model specifically, what each tax would do. I think the important point, I think Dave Mackay made it, is predictability and stability and understanding how taxes drive decisions. So, but this is early, this new tax, and what it will do, time will tell. But it is important to have a stable, predictable tax regime in order to drive long-term investment decisions.
Okay. Mr. Mackay, you stated that a failure to lower housing costs in Canada could, and I quote, put our entire economy at risk. What did you mean by this?
Solving for our housing challenge in Canada is absolutely critical in attracting and retaining the talent that we need for the success of our economy and the prosperity of our country. We are obviously short of housing currently, and there's a lot of initiatives that are underway to try to close that. We have a lot of work to do, but the nature of my answer is it is absolutely critical to talent and prosperity and growth.
Okay. This is for all of you eventually. The Deputy Governor of Bank of Canada stated that Canada is facing a productivity emergency. Do you agree? And how do we address this? So, Mr. Mackay, I'll start with you, and then we'll go around the table.
Productivity is linked to competitiveness. And for us to continue to enjoy the quality of life we have and the prosperity that we have in this wonderful country, we need to be competitive, and we need to be competitive on a productivity basis. We need to attract investment to do that. So all the things we've talked about, ensuring successful climate transition, having a stable tax regime, solving for housing, encouraging investment in more productivity is all important part of the overall competitive landscape in Canada.
How about any others?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have a point of order. I was looking back to the motion of this study, and I do not understand the relevance of some of these questions to what our study is specifically about, which is the environment and climate impacts related to the Canadian financial system, including current practices in that sector having to do with environment and climate impacts, analysis of regulatory and legislative mechanisms we could put in place to ensure the financial regime aligns with the Paris Agreement and thus promote the reduction of inherent risks namely physical and transition risks. So I don't see Mr. Mazier's line of questioning being at all consistent with what our study is about.
Well, his time's almost up anyway, but it is a bit of a stretch, but I mean, he is talking about
Chair.
capital flows and
Here-
so on.
here we're
And
talking
so
about
that's why,
major-
excuse me, Mr. Mayor, that's why I would not rule it out of order, but it is a bit of a stretch, but you have about 10 seconds.
These bank executives just asked for over $100 billion. We're talking about investments. Every penny that anybody makes in Canada is going to be needed under productivity. And of course, the Liberals would not want to talk about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Van Couverden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. My questions will be to the CEO and Executive Director of RBC, David McKay. Mr. McKay, in your opening remarks today, you espoused your commitments to net zero and reducing emissions, and you reiterated your recently published goal to triple renewable energy lending to $15 billion per year by 2030. And for reference, RBC currently finances fossil fuel industries in Canada with more than $30 billion per year. So if you achieve your objective without reducing funding for fossil fuels in the oil sands in Canada, RBC's clean to fossil fuel financing ratio will be less than 1-to-1. That's in 2030. The International Energy Agency states that a 6-to-1 ratio of clean to fossil fuel energy funding is necessary to achieve net zero, which, as I said, is your stated goal. So is your goal, published earlier this year, to within 6 years still fall within about 12x short of what the International Energy Agency states is necessary? Is that sufficiently ambitious?
Thank you for that question. And as we talk about renewables, it's just one part of the overall commitment to the energy grid. As we talk about the reduction in overall emissions from our economy is going to require further investment. Working with our customers to transition their businesses across every sector of the economy is going to require not only information and advice and support, it's going to require financial support as well. So we look at the overall envelope of what we will do with our clients it's quite significant. I can't put the overall ratio against that as yet, but we've actually committed to disclose our financing ratio of renewables to fossil fuels starting in 2024, as I talked about in my opening remarks, and that's an important part of the transition. So the ratio that you're quoting is just one part of the overall transition of our economy, and there's a much greater component outside of that commitment that we highlighted.
Okay, excellent. And just for reference, if it's currently $5 billion and your fossil fuel funding is at 30, then it's at 1-to-6 right now. And what's necessary is 6-to-1. So your ratio literally needs to flip upside down in order to achieve that goal. In 6 years, do you think that's possible?
I'm not sure how you're getting to 6-to-1. We're disclosing a very different
Sorry, Mr.
ratio
McKay,
than that currently.
Yeah, I can reemphasize.
No, I know you're
that's the-
30-to-5, but I don't reconcile that. So I encourage you. We are disclosing that ratio, that financing ratio. We will show you how we calculate that. I could submit that to you after this committee meeting. But that ratio is based off a global standard that we are using to disclose. So we're being very transparent about our journey because it's important to your question.
Okay, thank you. RBC is the world's largest financier of the oil sands. RBC has provided about $13.4 billion in financing for the oil sands. Now, the oil sands in Canada is the largest emitting sector in the energy industry or at all, accounting for over 12% of our country's total emissions, more than the entire province and all the activities in British Columbia. It's also important to note that a lot of the products that come from the oil sands, it'd be a stretch to describe them as energy. Bitumen is often used as tar for shingles and roads. It's calling it an energy product is perhaps a little bit of a stretch. But despite that, research recently revealed that emissions from the oil sands were possibly 6,300% even more polluting than they reported. So last week we had the oil executives here, and I asked the CEO of Suncor about that, and I asked him how it's possible with all the funding that's coming from Canadian banks, delivered to the oil sands sector, that the carbon required to produce a barrel of oil sands bitumen has actually increased over the last 20 years. Now, we'd think that all that investment could inspire a little bit of innovation. Do you feel like it's a good investment, regardless of whether or not they're profiting, because we know that they continue to make record profits, if the carbon intensity of a barrel of oil is increasing? Is that a good outcome and a good use of $13.4 billion of Canadians' hard-earned and invested dollars?
I'll just start off by saying I'm not sure. I can't reconcile where you get the information that we're the world's largest carbon financer of fossil fuels. I don't believe that to be true. And
Oil
I can
sands,
send you
sir.
the
Mr.
information
Mackay, it's just oil sands, not the oil industry.
I'm not even sure if that's accurate, but we will fact check that for you. Certainly not in the world, and I don't believe that's correct either. But as far as your comments, are we committed to this transition? I take is the theme of your question. We're absolutely committed to this transition. It's critical for our society that we make this transition. That's why we started a climate institute headed by John
Mr. Mackay,
Stackhouse, where we're
I'd
doing
like to fit in my
significant research.
I'm sorry for cutting you off, but given the record that a barrel of oil from the oil sands has actually become more carbon intensive over the last 20 years, and your stated goal is becoming net zero, can you commit to ending your financing of tar sands oil expansion?
A very brief answer, please, because we have to go on.
We are in a transition, and therefore we are not making the transition overnight. We are going to need this source of energy till we find new sources of energy.
Okay.
So we must transition this economy away from
Madame Posey.
carbon intense. We're not there yet.
Oui, alors, merci.
No, we're not.
Donc,
Thank you. The question my colleague has just asked, I'll put it to Mr. Masrani. At the end of 2023, the greatest pension fund in Europe sold for about $10 billion worth of oil from coal, and it was determined that the risk was very high. You already know that board directors have an obligation to be fair in the best long-term interest of the bank. So let me come back to the figures by my colleague. Oil sand activity might have brought in about 6,000% more than what the companies are declaring. And according to a Yale study, we have gotten these studies from them. So the track record was already bad, but it's even worse than we thought. So you must reassess the risk that seems to be increasing. Have you thought about exiting this sector as the European Pension Fund has done?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the member for her question. You know, we've set out a climate action plan, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, and also report on it on a regular basis. In fact, I refer you to our March 24 release of our sustainability suite of reports, which clearly outlines the methodology.
Sorry once again for interrupting you. I only have 2.5 minutes. Do you consider exiting the sector, considering that emissions are a lot higher than reported? That's what I'm asking. Is it a yes or a no? I understand it's no. You don't want to leave the fossil fuel industry. Is that what you're saying?
We are a great believer in an orderly transition, and we have to do both. We have to support oil and gas industry, responsible oil and gas industry, as we go through this orderly transition, and at the same time make sure we're providing the capital and the investment to move to a net zero world. And we have, solid reporting on this, and we give you the methodology with which we use, and that is available to you.
I put the same question to Mr. Masrani. I have 30 seconds left. It's disturbing. The figures that the University of Yale and the Ministry of Environment have provided. There's a European fund that left and sold its shares for $10 billion. Are you thinking about leaving? Not maybe overnight, but do you think about leaving this sector, Mr. Masrani?
No, pas Monsieur Masrani.
Sorry, Mr. Masrani, Mr. Mackay. I'm sorry, says the Member of Parliament. Mr. Mackay.
I think it's important that we continue to work with our clients on a transition. We have 80% of our clients that have presented a transition plan to get to net zero. It's important that we do this in an orderly fashion, or we risk the entire journey. We have to protect jobs along the way. Therefore, it's about the transition and helping our clients make the transition and helping them reduce their emissions and working collaboratively with them.
Merci. Monsieur Green.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Mackay, following up on that, you stated your company released the client engagement approach on climate, and it stated that it is prepared, RBC is prepared to make difficult business decisions and ultimately step away if a client, after repeated engagement, does not demonstrate sufficient planning for an energy transition. In your previous answer, you said 80% of your oil and gas investments do. What have you done with the other 20%? Have you stopped providing financing to any oil and gas clients?
We have definitely exited relationships around the world. It is overall part of our risk strategy. As far as your question on the 20%, we're actively working with them, and we have set targets around moving that 80% number towards 100%. This is a 30-year journey. So we're on that way.
We don't have 30 years, Mr. Mackay. I would state to you, sir, that yesterday, 4 seniors from Elders for Climate Sanity had their day in court because back in April, 4 of them, including 98-year-old Gail Lormer, were dragged out of a Hamilton area RBC branch for stating the obvious that RBC, as one of the #1 contributors to oil and gas financing, is not only greenwashing their communications, but actively investing in the ecological demise of our country. I want to know, to 98-year-old Gail Lormer, what message do you have from her in terms of the inherent contradictions between what you're saying here at committee and what you advertise to the public versus what is actually transpiring with the hundreds of billions of dollars you invest in oil and gas?
What is actually transpiring is that we're working with our clients to help them reduce their emissions. We're helping finance that transition. We're making unprecedented commitments to investing in Canadian renewable energy. We're making unprecedented commitment and executing on investing in equity and new solutions. We made an unprecedented first commitment to $500 billion in sustainable finance, which we've already financed $400 billion. We are working with our clients.
Canadian banks, including the RBC, financed $2 billion to the oil sands activities. When you look at all the land acknowledgements that all of you have done here today, First Nations and Métis Nations in Northern Alberta and Northwest Territories have been outspoken about the fact that the oil sands activities are poisoning their waters, causing high cancer rates, and these nations aren't getting any of the benefits. So is it fair to these nations that are opposed to the expansion of the oil sands that you continuously pump billions of dollars into this highly polluting sector?
I mean, it's I think a bit of we have, very briefly, please, Mr. Mackay, please.
We are working with First Nations across the country. Many First Nations are equity participants in energy projects, including pipelines across Canada. It's a big part of reconciliation in our country to allow our First Nations to participate, and they're a big part of the solution.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Cram now.
And they are participating.
We'll go to Mr. Cram.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here today and for sharing your financial institutions' decarbonization and net zero plans. I was wondering if each of the witnesses could share for the committee how much of your activities have been mandated by governments and how much of them have been voluntary at this point? Anyone who wants to jump in. Why don't we start with Mr. Mackay?
I think it's really important that we continue to work with all levels of government. This is not just federal, but provincial, municipal, to come up with the solutions and ideas and the policies that enable us to make this transition.
But at this point, though, like the federal government hasn't imposed any of this. All of the decarbonization and net zero plans that you shared in your opening statements, that has all been voluntary at this point. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And how have the financial institutions paid for these voluntary activities to date? Has it all been through, new service charges or through, internal efficiencies? How have you come up with the money to do all these activities? Why don't we start with Mr. Mackay?
These activities come from the resources of RBC. They come from the balance sheet of RBC. It comes from the health and strength of RBC. When we can make a commitment of $500 billion, it comes from our balance sheet. When we make a commitment of $15 billion on renewables, an unprecedented, it comes from our balance sheet. When we make a commitment to the Climate Institute and the tens of millions of dollars we're investing in researching policy and researching ideas and helping Canadians understand how to take this journey smartly and inclusively, comes from our resources.
Okay. Now, Mr. Mackay, earlier you spoke in favor of a standard taxonomy. Could you elaborate for the committee how that would work and who would pay for it?
Sorry, could you repeat your question? I didn't quite get it, sorry.
Yes, in an earlier question, you were asked about taxonomy, and you spoke out in favor of a standard taxonomy. How does it work? How much would it cost? Who would pay?
The work has been ongoing for a number of years. It's a multi-industry group that's working with various levels of government to come up with recommendations embedded through the Canadian government. So the cost is being absorbed by all the participants who are donating their time to come up with what is a very important part of the overall success of our journey.
But that can all be done through Canada's financial institutions. There's no need for the federal government to mandate that. Would you agree?
My understanding is the government has absolute decision authority at the end of the day on the taxonomy released to Canadians. We are making recommendations. There are multiple constituents at the table, from asset managers to pension funds to insurance to banks. We're just one of the participants and the overall stakeholders in the framework.
But certainly every financial institution does a thorough analysis before investing millions or billions of dollars in an initiative. This standard taxonomy is something that the banks could get together and do on their own if they really wanted to, without government intervention. Would you agree?
No, I wouldn't agree. I think the taxonomy requires a broader group of stakeholders to agree. Don't forget, investors are coming from all shapes and forms and sectors of the economy, inside and outside Canada. They're seeking kind of broader agreement on how Canada looks at the framework. I do not believe if the banks got together themselves and came up with a taxonomy that the investment community would necessarily adopt it per se. So I think a broader consensus is important.
What can the government do on taxonomies that the banks are not capable of doing?
The government is acting as a convener and helping bring us together, multi-sector, to try to find agreement where there's very differing views on some sectors. So they're convening, is multi-sector, and I think that's the very definition of a role of government, is to help convene on tough issues and think through policy and get input and make recommendations, and that's the process we're going through. It's not a simple task and outcome.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that if there's difference of views among the financial institutions, there would also be a difference of views among the potential investors, and those differences of views would not necessarily go away just because the government says so, correct?
Rapidement, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur Mackay.
Answer quickly.
That's why you talk. That's why conversation is important, to understand different perspectives, to explore them, to explore solutions as a group of multi-stakeholders. I think that's how you build a better country.
Merci. Alors, Monsieur Long.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. It's your turn. It's up to you to close the second round.
Witnesses, it's incredibly valuable for us to have the senior executives from our major banks at the table all at the same time. I don't remember that happening in a committee for me in the last 8.5 years. So thank you for taking the time to discuss this important issue. Mr. Mackay, I know we've had a lot of questions, but I want to drill down a little bit in terms of the sustainable financing. The sustainability-linked loans and bonds, the SLLs and SLBs, to the oil and gas companies that RBC is employing. How do those funds work, and how are you measuring success towards net zero using those funds?
Thank you for that question. When you look at the whole emerging industry of sustainability linked loans. This is an emerging category that investors have really focused on quite significantly globally. Each loan, each facility is tailored to the individual issuer, what sector they're in, what they're trying to achieve from a sustainability perspective. They have to articulate that's embedded in the overall prospectus and rules, and therefore it's very important that not one size fits all, and this is a highly kind of customized sector, and reporting is required to go along, and that becomes the issuer, the companies that we help finance, that becomes their issue to report that clearly to their bank group and to the investors in their notes.
Thank you. And then that links to the disclosure so that we could show the targets that they're working towards that you're agreeing on through your financial instruments. I'm seeing a nodding of a head, so thank you for that. Yeah. Also, I'm sorry to stay on with you, but because of maybe some of the other questions, I'd like to clarify one or two things. When we're looking at stability, we had the oil executives here last meeting or a few meetings ago. They talked about the importance of stability in terms of the instruments that they're dealing with, either through the government or through financial institutes. The Canadian banking industry is known for stability and regulations and that are agreed on, publicly managed, I can also add, which is unusual for a banking industry in the world. When you look at like the political pressures that we put on you, of firing the Bank of Canada president or axing the tax or things that could actually have a real impact on Canadian businesses or businesses investing in Canada. How important is it for us to be as stable as you are?
What a wonderful question. Stability is the essence of investing. Predictability. When you talk to the energy industry, when you talk to the manufacturing industry, when you talk to the EV battery industry, when we talk to the banking industry, we're making long-term commitments. Yeah. These aren't one-year commitments or two-year commitments. We make 4, 5, 10-year commitments, 20-year commitments, and therefore the predictability of the world you operate in is very, very important. The tax predictability, the operating, the rules, how stable are they? The government in Canada should take pride in the fact that it's a country, particularly its banking industry. We have the top banking industry in the world, and we have to protect that. It's so important to the prosperity of our economy.
And I think in terms of the disclosure and what we're looking at working on together through taxonomy, you have branches in Texas and all over the states. They have a regime of taxonomy that we need to also look at, that as we develop, that capital doesn't flow out of the country. So the role of governments you've just highlighted very clearly. And I think maybe we have to take back the role of politicians and look in the mirror a little bit so that we can help you reach some of that. But the pressure is, we've just got a pipeline to the coast. The oil and gas companies are going to have better margins. They said that in their meeting. They could have the same profits without production escalating faster than their reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. When you look at the net zero goals, is that something that could be considered, the increasing profits actually being reinvested into greenhouse gas reductions?
I'll leave that to that specific question to yourself and the energy and role of government to play with each industry and understanding the overall ecosystem you're trying to build. But we do have to get on with carbon reduction emission. Yep. We have opportunities to invest in carbon sequestration and carbon capture that has to move through. There are projects that we're talking about that can have a big impact. And therefore, I think that discussion goes hand in hand with the discussion you had. How do we finance that? There's different ways of financing.
Alors, on passe maintenant au troisième tour, s'il vous plaît.
We'll now move on to our third round of questions. Mr. Leslie, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to pick on somebody different because Mr. McKay has taken a lot. Maybe I'll look to BMO. Just to make this simple for any Canadians watching, when a bank is lending money to a project, to a company, they are, of course, considering risks, but they are basically want to make sure that they're going to get the loan repaid. Is that a simplistic way of saying how this money flows?
It's an important consideration, yes.
In your view, should Canadian energy projects be held to a different standard than that?
I don't think energy projects should be held to a different standard. We look at any project, whether it's energy or otherwise, through the lens of risk and return, to your point just a moment ago, Mr. Leslie.
So after any of these banks are funding a project that has been approved by the federal government, and we've talked about predictability. Well, when Cabinet decides that a pipeline that's been approved through the robust regulatory process this country has, that's not exactly predictable. So I think the government needs to look itself in the mirror when it talks about predictability. But at the end of the day, you are lending money to provide capital for a project that has been through a robust regulatory process. Is it seem unreasonable to have the government deciding to impose additional red tape on you when you are simply funding a project that the government itself approved?
Well, I should point out that the role of the banks in the ecosystem, whether it's on the transition or any other sector, is to decide whether or not we're going to finance a project or finance a company, and we assess each of them on their own merits, rather than follow a prescription that's been given to us. We have to, at the same time, of course, stay within all of the guidelines of our regulatory and legal requirements. But in the end, you know, if I use the transition as an example, we look to serve our clients on their decarbonization journey. We don't dictate their business practices, and we make decisions as we go through with each of them in terms of the projects that we choose to finance and those that we might not.
Thank you. I'm going to switch over to Scotia because I think they've been left out too. There was discussion regarding reconciliation, which is obviously important to everyone around this table, and I appreciate your land acknowledgements. Fort McKay First Nation and Suncor have recently signed an MOU, and so there's been claims made that First Nations seem to not support energy projects. In your view, and I'll happily listen to others on this, is economic reconciliation an important piece of the broader reconciliation conversation, and do you as capital lenders have a role to play to ensure that that happens?
Thank you for the question. I won't speak to the Suncor MOU that you referenced, but I do think Indigenous reconciliation and economic reconciliation are connected. And so I think that's important to consider. I also recognize that I think we've made progress in that regard. And some of these equity ownerships from Indigenous communities into pipelines, for example, you know, we as an institution have made great progress with the announcement of launching Cedar Leaf Capital, which will actually bring more capital into the system from Indigenous owned and operated financial institutions.
Thank you. Now, multiple pension plans hold investments in all of your banks, as well as in Canadian oil and gas companies and in other natural resource companies. And obviously, I think we would all agree that we need our pension plans not only to be solvent, but to be maximizing the rate of return. Broadly speaking, do you have concerns when government is imposing policies on those pension funds and on our banking institutions that ultimately may reduce the return, and thus far have a track record of doing so, and take away from the legal fiduciary duty of the institutions, of the businesses, to get a return on investment?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The key here is the energy transition is a business opportunity as well as the right thing. And if we as institutions, pension funds, government, banks can make it attractive both from a scale perspective and a returns perspective for capital to flow into the energy transition, it will be attractive for the pension funds. It will be attractive for other stakeholders to participate in.
Maybe I'll switch to TD. We talked about emissions-free energy, which is important. I'm a big believer in nuclear and really see a lot of potential in small nuclear modular reactors. What role does nuclear fit into your capital investments and lending in terms of our future transition?
Very, very quickly, please, Mr. Masrani.
Yeah, the transition, the orderly transition we are talking about, we need to keep an open mind as to what makes sense to be included in that. and nuclear can play an important role. And I think you rightly point out that it's something we should be seriously considering.
Thank you. Mr. Ali.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for taking the time out and being here today. I'd like to comment on just like Mr. McKay, when he was speaking, that Canada should take pride. I agree with it, and certainly we should take pride in our banking system. Because of the strong banking system in Canada, we survived in 2007, avoided that meltdown, and even in this difficult time of COVID, we have gone through that because banks have played a key role in it. And I agree with him. When we are transitioning from one side to another, we need to have a long-term investments and also make tough decisions. I just wanted to comment on that, and thank you for your role in our economy and keeping Canada's banking system strong. To Mr. Masrani, in 2021, the TD Bank committed to the Net Zero Banking Alliance and acknowledged that material financial risk which the climate transition presented to its shareholders. And since 2021, TD has had the dubious distinctions of having the largest increase of investments in companies that are not aligned with net zero. I would refer to a recent report that found that TD's ratio of financing for clean energy versus financing for companies not aligned with net zero was the lowest among Canada's largest banks. So that is it's in response to your investors' resolution calling for increased transparency. You have claimed that TD is largely meeting transparency requirements, but this statement ignores the more substantive transition plans developed by its Canadian and international peers. I just wanted to ask you, would you commit to developing more substantive transparency requirement, or it's necessary for regulators to step in to ensure that this is happening?
Mr. Chair, I thank the member for his question. We've been, one of the leaders in not only announcing a climate action plan as to our path to net zero, but have been very vocal and a big proponent of an orderly transition. And we've been very transparent as to how we get there, the commitments we've made, and what kind of interim targets that we plan to meet as well. And we've been reporting on this, the methodologies we use, the criteria we use on an annual basis. In fact, our last report was issued in March of this year, which clearly lays out as to how we plan to meet our commitments and what stage are we at in that journey. So we are meeting all the disclosure requirements that various entities impose on us, and we plan to continue to engage with various standard setters to ensure there's consistency and measurable criteria for disclosure, and we intend to follow those.
Chair, I think the rest of my time I'll share with Mr. Adam, please.
Vancouverden, okay.
Yeah, Adam.
Sorry, go ahead, Mr.
Thank you.
Vancouverden.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. I'm not sure if this is something that we're able to do, but I'd like unanimous consent from the committee to table a report from the Financial Post indicating that all Canadian, of 5 Canadian banks were in the top 20 for fossil fuel funding in 2022, and that RBC topped the list in 2022 and 2023. Would that be possible?
Well, I'll ask, do we have unanimous consent? Ça a l'air que oui.
Apparently, yes.
Document. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Eh,
Thank you,
well,
Mr.
wait a
Chair,
minute.
and thank you to my
Actually, I'm just, is it bilingual?
I'll have it translated, yes.
Great, and then you can send it to the committee for distribution. Okay, thank
Okay,
you, Madam
thank you very
Chair.
much.
Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, the time's up on this, on Mr. Ali's time. Madame Posey.
Pour 2 minutes.
2 minutes? 2.5 minutes. I'll go in the same direction as Mr. Van Coverden. Close to 7 trillion American dollars have come from banks for fuel financing since 2016 after the Paris Agreement. And the institutions that are represented here spent about 900 billion over the same period, 13% of global financing by banks in a country that accounts for 0.5% of the global population. So indeed, the 5 Canadian banks are ranked amongst the top banks. Scotia is ranked 11th. What would you tell the many Canadians who feel that your actions and decisions are helping to finance climate chaos, population mobility, deforestation, poisoned water, toxic residues, cancer, and ecosystem destruction?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My message to Canadians was that we can be a leader in the energy transition. We have a stable economy, innovative companies, strong talent. We should move away from emission reductions at all costs to a comprehensive strategy that encompasses all sources of energy. We should aggressively decarbonize fossil fuel production through innovative technologies like carbon capture. We should embrace nuclear. We should provide more incentives to accelerate renewables. We should support our hydro companies to build necessary.
Je vous arrête.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Oui.
Sorry, point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Vancouver.
I'm sorry. Je suis désolé, Madame Posey.
I'm sorry, Ms. Posey, for the interruption.
We should move away from emissions reductions. Could he clarify?
I think
a point of order. It's not a point of order, but it's noted. Madame Posey, continuez.
Ms. Posey, you may continue. I hope you stop the clock. So what you're telling us, Mr. Thompson, is the same thing that we heard from the oil companies, those capture carbon and will succeed. What I would like to know is why are the Canadian banks devoting such an amount in fuel financing when compared to the other banks in the world?
Our objective is to help our clients get through the energy transition in a thoughtful way that helps both them get through the transition, reducing emissions, and having the Canadian economy thrive. So I think what you're hearing today from Bank of Nova Scotia is that's our commitment. We need to be thoughtful, we need to be committed to it, and we need to take a long-term view on it.
Ce que j'entends aujourd'hui, Monsieur Thompson.
Mr. Thompson, what I'm hearing today is that your solutions are exactly the ones we've heard from the oil and gas industry. So that's what I'm hearing. Do I still have some time left, Mr. Chair? 30 seconds. Let me try with you, Mr. Dodig. You have a policy to stop activities with oil and gas actors who do not sufficiently plan net zero activities. With a yes or no, does this policy involve specific timelines? If it's yes, the question will be different, and if it's no, the follow-up question will be different as well.
Merci pour votre question, monsieur.
Thank you for your question.
We do have timelines. Yes, we do. We have timelines. We work with clients in a very commonsensical way. Larger companies have better resources and better plans.
C'est bon, ça répond à la question.
Oui, ça répond à la question.
You've answered my question. Thank you. Please send clarifications to the clerk. if you could send the timelines you've referred to the clerk of the committee for distribution to the members, it will be appreciated.
Mr. Mackay, several reports, including one by the Center for the Future of Work dated December 2022, have confirmed that inflation in Canada is driven by profits in a few sectors. Oil and gas top that list. Do you know what sector number 2 is? Mr. Mackay?
Yeah, sorry, no, I'm not familiar with the report you're referencing.
The second one was banking, sir. So as Canadians struggle to make ends meet, paying for higher mortgages and higher gas prices driving up inflations, their earnings are padding the corporate profits of fossil fuel companies and banks like RBC, which you also invest and profit from. So what do you have to say to workers that you're personally benefiting from a double whammy of investing in oil and gas and higher interest rates on mortgages?
We are very concerned about the overall impact on Canadians from higher interest rates. We're working with Canadians on their mortgages. As you know, mortgage rates are set by the market at the end of the day and bond pricing.
Mr. Mackay, do you know the average salary of a Canadian here in Ontario in your home province?
Canadians to help them continue to manage.
I'm satisfied with his answer.
Mr. Mackay, it goes back to Mr.
Do you know what the average salary is of a Canadian here in Ontario, sir?
Average household income or average
no,
salary?
$94,000, sir, roughly. $94,153. Sir, in 2023, we had the hottest year on record. How much money did you make?
2023? I don't recall the exact number.
$15.22 million, sir.
Okay.
So in 2024, your board has approved a pay raise of 12%, which means you'll be bringing in $17 million. You're profiting from both high inflation on oil and gas and mortgages as a direct compensation. So does your bonus package include the performances in the oil and gas sector, yes or no?
My compensation is set by the board and includes a number of publicly disclosed targets, financial targets, strategic targets, climate targets. 10% of my does not include any specific reference to oil and gas.
So it has your climate target. So how much did your climate target metric in the last fiscal year include in your bonuses? Have you met those targets?
We have met those targets, yes, given the strong performance we've had in helping influence policy, Climate Institute, the renewables programs, the $400 billion in sustainable financing we put out there, the leadership we've shown on policy. Yes, we did meet our targets in 2020.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Deltel, how much time do I have? 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. My questions will go to Mr. Thompson on the First Nations. We all recognize that more than ever before, we need the support of First Nations to develop our economy, particularly the energy future and the environmental future. They are part of the solution, and we need the support of First Nations. And that's why our party has taken firm commitments to make sure that every future project that affects a territory that is recognized by as being owned by First Nation involve them. They have to be a part of our prosperity. For many years, we just gave them checks. What we want to do now is, together with them, create paychecks. Mr. Thompson, in your testimony, during your opening remarks, you talked a lot about the First Nations.
That they don't own the land like it. They have to pass through the government. So how do you deal when you have a First Nation community who would like to have a big project, and then you have to address that they don't own the land as it is?
Thank you to the member for his question, Mr. Chair. As I'd mentioned, Indigenous reconciliation is extremely important, and economic reconciliation is part of that. And what I think as a Canadian and also as a bank CEO, I'm pleased to see is the participation of the Indigenous communities in a lot of the sustainable infrastructure that is currently investing in. And this is when I get back to the point around the energy transition is so important because it's a business opportunity, it's an economic opportunity, as well as a risk that needs to be dealt with. And we can use this moment in time to make sure that we have Indigenous and economic reconciliation at the same time.
Monsieur Thompson, dans votre témoignage d'introduction.
Mr. Thompson, you also talked about the Canadian potential. We have everything to succeed in the transition and to succeed with the future of natural resources and our energy transition. Now, if we have a business model that makes sure that the rules are strict to the point that companies are not invested in Canada or that projects will be done elsewhere. In Canada, we consume 7% more fuel. If we close the Canadian taps, it's not the planet that will win, it's Qatar and Saudi Arabia. So how is it a good thing if we have measures that are so strict that are slowing down the enthusiasm we have here, whereas we need all that in Canada as well?
Thank you, member, for your question. And Mr. Chairman, I do agree. We have a great opportunity in front of us. We have a stable economy, innovative companies, strong talent. We have world-class companies in our energy sector, and they will invest in helping us through this transition, and the financial institutions have a role to play with that. So I'm very optimistic about the outlook for Canada as we navigate through a very complex situation.
Peut-être une dernière question. Pouvez-vous?
Maybe one last question. Could you give me your definition of greenwashing and how could you avoid greenwashing and rather ensure that you are investing efficiently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think transparency, trust is key to what we're trying to do at the Bank of Nova Scotia. We've done a lot of disclosure. We've been recognized for that disclosure by a number of third parties. We've won awards for that disclosure. And I think disclosure is really important. I think it's really important that all stakeholders understand where we're allocating our capital and how we're helping our clients through the transition.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Thank you all for your testimonies. Mr. Chair, just a reflection from my part. I am one of the 7.7 million members of the Desjardins movement, and I have learned that Desjardins could not delegate someone to take part in this meeting. It's a disappointment. It's Quebec's economic force. I'm sure Ms. Posé will agree with me. They have 56,000 employees. I was surprised that they couldn't delegate anyone here. I'm surprised. When we are talking about finance in Quebec, we always go through Desjardins. They're a major player. And in my community activities, in my riding at the end of the week, I'm always delighted to see when Desjardins is not there, it's suspicious because they're always present in the communities. And it's the same in the financial world. I think they should have sent somebody here. They have 56,000 employees. I don't understand why they couldn't find someone to come here. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Let me make a reminder. When we are talking about the great Canadian banks, that's what we are talking about here. That was a request that was made, and we are talking about the Canadian banks that are the top financiers of fossil fuels, and it's not Desjardins. I did not quite get the last part of your question. Today, we were dealing with the banks and Desjardins, as a cooperative, wasn't invited to be part of this panel. But they have been invited to come another time, but unfortunately, they refused. That was the clarification I wanted to make. We sent them an invitation. Clarification, Mr. Chair. I checked twice before I made that comment. Let me confirm. Well, I also verified twice with the clerk. Thank you. Ms. Leo Taylor-Roy will ask questions now.
And I'd like to start by thanking all of the witnesses here today. Today we have the CEOs of the major banks. Last week we had the CEOs of the major oil and gas companies. And well, it's a great pleasure to have you here to testify. I do hope that one day we will see a woman among the ranks of the CEOs. I would like to start by saying that Canadians have always been able to trust our banks to protect our deposits and for the financial stability of our country. But today, many Canadians do not trust our banks to protect the future of our planet. And this is very troubling, and there's many reasons why this is the case. And with my questioning, I'd like to address this. So there have been comments regarding that you're working with all clients on sustainability and meeting goals. But we know that the oil and gas companies or sector, although it represents less than 5% of our GDP, is responsible for more than 31% of our emissions. And we also know that the 5 major Canadian banks have been increasing their investments in fossil fuel companies. This seems very inconsistent with meeting the net zero goals that we have set. And I'm wondering if each of you would be willing to commit to only financing fossil fuel companies if the projects are verified to have an impact that will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions significantly. Mr. Dodig, perhaps we could start with you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your question. It's a great question. I will commit that our bank will work with companies that are working toward a path to net zero across the energy spectrum. I think we have a responsibility, and candidly,
excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm just asking for a quick answer because I want everyone to answer, but will you commit?
I'm committed to working with all our clients to a net zero. We are working on that.
But only finance projects that reduce emissions.
Well, you can't actually define it that way because not every project on its own, because I would be misleading you. What I would tell you is that on its whole,
that's answered my question. Thank you. Yeah. Mr. White, could you answer the same question? Mr. White?
You're on mute, Mr. White. You're on mute. Yeah, there we go.
Pardon me, is that better?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, member, for the question. I think the most effective thing we can do is serve our clients on the transmission. That's the best way we can reduce real-world emissions, as opposed to walking away and just declaring that our own emissions are better. This is the best way we can reduce real-world emissions, and that's our strategy.
Okay, so you're not committing to only invest in projects that reduce emissions in the oil and gas sector.
We're committing
Mr.
to continuing
Masrani,
to finance our clients.
Mr. Masrani, would you commit to that?
We've laid out a very clear climate action plan as to how we are helping our clients achieve their net zero goals, and we've laid out a strategy that clearly outlines the basis on which the bank
thank you. I'm sorry,
spending.
I don't have much time, so I'm just really looking for a direct answer. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Member. Mr. Chair, we've made our commitments very public around financing climate solutions and helping our clients navigate the energy transition.
Okay, thank you.
We're proud of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem is that the commitments are vague. We're talking about sustainable investments. There's no real definition around it. There's not a lot of transparency around it. But I do want to switch my question to something else because I referenced that we had the CEOs of the oil and gas companies here last week. And they all said that the price on pollution program was very important in terms of their making decisions, long-term investments to reduce emissions. And today you've talked about the need for certainty and stability. Would you agree that a leader of the opposition, in saying he's going to get rid of that program at this point, is somehow introducing uncertainty and instability into some of the investments that are being made? And we could start with Mr. Masrani.
Thank you for your question. I'm not sure I really understand what the actual question is.
Let me repeat it then. You mentioned the need for stability, for predictability. Last week, we had the CEOs of the oil and gas companies here who stated that the price on pollution program that is in place is necessary for that stability for companies making long-term investments to reduce emissions. I'm asking you, does the threat of canceling that program introduce instability or uncertainty into some of these investment decisions. And I'm sure you're looking at some of them with your clients
We
as well.
are kind of out of time.
Well, Mr. Chair, and with all due respect, I was.
Yeah, but we can't. Well, I guess what I'm getting
when
at.
someone was on mute, I had lost a lot of time.
I understand. But what I'm getting at is we can't have 5-minute answers from everybody here. So
thank you. That would be,
yeah. So
okay.
can you all just take a brief stab at that? So because we are over time.
Since the question was put to me, all I can say is that, we've laid out a very clear plan as to how we plan to manage through this transition. And I'm not sure whether I can add anything. I think the point on taxonomy is important. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, can I, if you don't mind, Mr. Thompson, do we need policy stability in climate policy? That's the question, I think.
Yeah, listen, I think this is it's a complex question. I understand it's a supply and a demand issue, and I understand the complexities with.
Okay. We'll have to go to Mr. White.
So I just want to restate the question because I'm asking whether we need stability in climate policy for investment decisions.
Yeah. Mr. White?
As with any policy, the more stability and predictability we have, the better.
Okay.
Recognizing it's an ongoing and changing dynamic.
Okay.
And the market reacts to the change.
Thank you. Mr. Dodig.
Focus on policies that focus on environmental responsibility, economic security, and energy security, and do that in a very balanced way. That's my ask.
Okay, Mr.
Always,
Mackay.
every day.
Mr. Mackay.
We need predictability and stability. There are many ways of achieving that. At the end of the day, they're not just one way, and there's multiple tools to do that and to affect that.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being here. I know you have extremely busy schedules.
We still have two more interventions of 2.5 minutes. You can't give your Liberal colleagues extra time and take time away from us.
Sorry.
Do we have an extra round?
2.5 minutes. Second.
No, we did it. See, this is the sixth. This is the Madame Taylor-Roy was the sixth. But thank you for keeping me on my toes. I appreciate it. But I just want to thank. It's all part of accountability. That's democratic accountability. That's important. But I want to thank our witnesses for being here. We know you're very busy and you have heavy responsibilities managing billions of dollars in our economy. And we're particularly pleased that you were able to be here on the same day and time. So thank you for being here and for your contributions to our study. I hope you have a good day. Thank you.
Here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.